Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here today. It's a pleasure to see such a nice and diverse audience with us here. We'll be discussing the European Defence Cooperation, something that a few years ago was vaguely mentioned in passing, and suddenly in the last 2-3 years has become quite the topic. And it's quite uncertain what it actually means. So I have with me an extremely interesting panel where we'll be discussing exactly what is European cooperation in the naval industry, what does it look like, what are the challenges, and where are we going with all this? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my fantastic panelists. So here to my left, I have Davide CUCINO, chairman of SEA Naval. Then next to Davide, I have Jean-Marie Dumont, deputy director and head of defense and security at the GICAN. Then here to my right, I have Milosz MOMOT, head of unit within the Director General of Defense Industry and Space. And last but certainly not least, I have with me also today Dr. Elie TENENBAUM, Director of Security Center of the IFRI, the French Institute for International Studies. Now, without further ado, I would like to kick off this conversation with you, Elie. If you could perhaps tell us a little bit about the challenges, the current strategic challenges that our countries and navies are facing at the moment, and perhaps some of the main threats.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for having us here today. I think I start with quite of a truism, that is the security environment for Europe today is heavily degraded. Actually, I've been in the think tank business for more than a decade now, and I remember 10 years ago when we had our foresight exercises. And when I look it back with a hindsight, the place where we are now is actually in the lower pessimistic to very pessimistic tiers that we had in terms of scenarios. You know, when we envision all the possible scenarios, where we are now is actually pretty pessimistic. If you ask most Europeans what the threat landscape is, so a couple of things to keep in mind: the threat landscape, the partner landscape. The threat landscape today mostly focused and rotates around Russia. The emergence, the fact that Russia used to be a problematic neighbor and moved from problematic neighbor to acute threat, and this is clearly changes everything, because the sheer size and scope of this adversary make it very, very different from what 10 years ago the main threat used to be considered as terrorism, non-state organization, etc. So this is very different, because what we have with Russia is, of course, a threat on land, but also a threat in the air and space, in the sea domain, from the surface to the seabed. And I think that this is going to be of very extreme interest to us, but also in the cyber, electronic warfare, and information spectrum. And all these domains are very heavily connected, and I think that this is also what makes the world today and the security environment of Europe much more challenging than it used to be, is that we have this increasing connection and connectivity of our threat, both in terms of geography, and I'll come to that in a moment, but also in terms of domains of warfare, or domain of activity. You have also geographic connectivity, and here again, I think that the sea dimension, the maritime dimension, is going to be key. Is that we see that, you know, this immediate Europe-centric, Russian-centric now sort of threat assessment has now been to be more and more connected to the rest of the environment. You just have North Korean troops active now operating on the Ukrainian theater. You have, of course, Iranian missiles and drones which are targeting and hitting European country. And of course, you have Chinese component and Chinese capital and Chinese technology, which is backing the whole of the Russian war effort. So it's impossible just to look at Russia as the only threat. You actually have a conundrum or a spectrum of connected threats, and that takes us to many different places in the world, and mostly in the Indo-Pacific area and mostly in the Middle East area. And you have the Red Sea theater right now, which is inextricably connected to the whole economy of the world. So this increasing connectivity, it also goes through the sea lines of communications, or our ability to either disrupt, control, or keep our ability to basically circumvent this sort of massive landmass, which is turning into an increasingly threatening attention. So maybe I stopped there for just the threat landscape. So sorry to scare everybody off right from the beginning, but I think it's important to keep that in mind. And this is a common threat, and I insist on the common because we're here to speak about European cooperation. And this is common thread to all of the European and even to more generally to the Western community in the world.
Well, thank you very much, Elie. And I think it's not so much that you're scaring us, it's more that it's interesting to see how everything is so incredibly interconnected. And we're not just talking about one domain, we're not just talking about one country, we're not just talking about one system. We're talking about everything, as you said, being interconnected in so many intricate ways. So very complex. But it's not all doom and gloom. This is also why we're here to discuss this today. So just to move on from the threats and challenges for a second, I would like to move over to you, Davide. And because you are chairman of SEA Naval, but you also work for Fincantieri. And it would be very interesting if you could tell us a little bit how this is shaping industrial policy at the moment.
Let me first of all thank you for the invitation, and even to spend maybe 10 seconds about SEA Naval. We are a permanent working group under SEA Europe. Is composed by 8 large shipyards who makes 90% of the ships that are manufactured in the European Union. We have 10 billion turnover yearly. We give 35,000 direct jobs opportunities, and especially we are very much involved in research and development with a 10% average on our yearly turnover. So it is I think those are impressive numbers. Let me also congratulate with all the people that are sitting around, and they are representatives of companies that today, as last day opportunity, have submitted calls, have submitted their bids to the calls of this year European Defence Fund. We are a large community, no matter whether we belong to the naval sector, but we are a large community, and we are larger and larger each year. The calls are coming out. Having said that, about naval, we are probably in a paradox, because orders are there, contracts are there. We submit a lot of bids to third countries, so the chances are there, and we work for improve technologically a domain that needs to be very much in pace with the technological requirement. Ships stand for a long time, so we need to produce ships that are up to the time, ships that may become modular, that need to meet the decarbonization requirement. Needs to have a lot of artificial intelligence on board, and especially ships that are less and less occupied by crew. They must be unmanned because the risks are very large at sea. Having said that, what is the response that we have done in the last years? I think that PESCO has become a very important opportunities for the industry. And this has given the path and the path to the participation to different calls at the European Defence Fund level. What it is important is that has been an important element for us because it has enabled a lot of companies to meet, gather together and to propose solutions together, which was quite a different way to work until a few years ago. We have started with the research and development programs, and now we are teaming up in a lot of different capability development programs. I can mention some. Probably the most famous is the flagship program of the multimodular patrol corvette, but it is not the only one, and it is not the only domain, the naval one. So I think that this is very important because it has obliged companies to change the way of thinking. It was very important that a very significant amount of money has been allocated to the naval sector. So far, we estimated that 600 million euro of the European Defence Fund has been allocated to the naval sector. But again, it is a paradox. Maybe we have enough order, but in order to be technologically advanced, we need to be more prepared. And then maybe I stop for the moment. One important thing is and it has been just mentioned, is the underwater dimension. It's still not yet a domain, but you never know. And the underwater dimension is a chance and a challenge for the industries. It's a chance because especially in the last couple of years, the critical infrastructure protection has become a core, central in providing security to the nations and security at sea. You don't have to forget that most all the trade are done by shipment, and as I'm used to say, no shipping, no shopping. So it's very important to protect the sea, and the underwater is a dimension that is particularly critical. Why it is a challenge? Because we start almost from zero. All companies, not only naval, there are a lot of startups are working on underwater solutions, but we don't have an ecosystem which is mature. So we need really the effort of everybody, and in advocating the effort of everybody, it means also that nations need to do one step back and to try to create these ecosystems also at Navy level. Maybe I can take the chance to say that tomorrow we are launching a study on underwater at SEA Naval. There will be a panel where there will be an interaction on the study, and there will be a couple of interesting case studies that are happening around Europe. So I encourage everybody to be there and to listen what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't put your mic just yet. I do have a question. You were saying that you don't see the underwater area as a domain. I was interested as to why you don't see it as a domain yet.
By definition, there is a categorization of domains, and at the moment, underwater belongs to the naval domain. But too much is happening, and as I said, you never know. I don't expect very soon that it becomes a domain, but the situation is very clear around the world, and we need really to work on a lot of efforts to make the underwater a secure environment.
Alex,
yeah.
maybe we can describe it as a domain analytically, but institutionally, in terms of doctrine, then it means that you're flagging, specific funding or bids to say, okay, we're putting this amount of money not to the maritime, but to underwater and seabed, for instance. And that means that you're making sure that this goes to the specific aspect of the more general maritime. So it has implications. I think that this is what Davide sort of...
Sure. If I may just say, underwater as such has been recognized under the European Defence Fund. That's a separate category of action. I mean, this is quite recent. We're talking only 2021 when we came up with the European Defence Fund. And there are like 17 different categories of action, naval combat being one, but we also have a separate, and that was already recognized, and that was coming from the needs expressed by the member states, because in the, ultimately member states are doing the programming of the EDF. That's underwater threats. It already requires and it deserves its own categorization, so it's a separate category. However, when programming still at European Defence Fund, there's a ballpark figure of 10% that is kind of pre-agreed, pre-earmarked for the waterborne categories, and that includes naval and underwater threat. So this 10% of the budget is kind of pre-earmarked for both of those categories of action. But nevertheless, in our thinking, in the thinking of programming with the member state, it already deserved its own category.
Thank you very much. And actually, I was going to turn to you, Milosz, so very handy that you picked up there. Because, so the question I was going to ask was, you know, sort of similarly to Davide, how are you seeing everything that Elie outlined before? How is that shaping things up at the DG DEFIS? And so you were saying, first and foremost, that the underwater domain has become a domain, at least as far as the EDF is concerned. Any other point you would like to raise?
Yes, so first of all, just few words, again, as Davide presented his organization, let me just say that in DG Defense, so DG DEFIS, we are in charge of the promoting competitiveness of the European defense industry, and one of the tools that we use for promotion of this competitiveness is the European Defense Fund. So it's an 8 billion program on the European Union budget, and how we work, we give grants to research and development cooperations, so to projects in the area of research and also development on specific technologies across all domains of defense technologies. Now, we operate in annual work programs that the work programs are developed by the member states. So the member state kind of pre-agree what are the financing needs, the financing objectives for next year. And then we implement it via calls for proposals where industrial consortia, so industries together with research organizations, but also other actors, submit bids, submit proposals for projects. We evaluate those projects, we award the money, and then we supervise the implementation of those agreements. Important day for us today, because in like less than 4 hours, we're closing the annual calls for proposal 2024 EDF. So we expect to receive applications for more than 1.1 billion euros in grants. Judging from the track record of last year, we are likely to receive more than 200, 250 applications. So we're very excited about that. Now, building a little bit on what Davide said, and he mentioned that this cooperation in the naval sector in particular has been being picked up gradually, but it's a phenomenon of the last 3-4 years. Indeed, we see it coincidentally with the emergence of the European Defence Fund. So we see that this particular industry, so naval industry, kind of started using European Defence Fund as a framework for cooperation. And this is partly because, okay, the member states, again, are trying to push the national naval industries to cooperate more because it brings efficiencies. It also allows developing technologies that are crucial in need by those navies, and ultimately developing superior technologies and also at a lower cost. But also because I think that with providing the European Defence Fund and providing this opportunity for cooperation, the industry and the research organization that wanted to be active in this domain kind of started experiencing in working together, and kind of as scary as it seemed in the beginning, it proved that it's actually working in practice. We have now quite a few projects under European Defence Fund that are strictly speaking naval domain. We also have several projects from the predecessor program, EDIDP, and the figures are picking up. So I said 8 billion is being kind of pre-earmarked for the naval and underwater categories, and I think we are on a very good track to reach those figures.
Thank you. You did open the door to how the EDF works, so I will have a couple of questions. First of all, anybody can apply? Is it like bigger organizations, smaller organizations? Is it open to everybody?
So let me start that this is for industrial consortia. So industrial consortia including companies from the European Union, but also research organizations, academia. The consortium has to include at least 3 partners from 3 member states or Norway. Norway is cooperating within the European Defence Fund. We have an exception for just one type of calls when we have very new technologies where 2 consortium members can be to apply for grants. We have a strict rules on the ownership control of the company, so we're really talking about the European industry. There are some exceptions for European companies that are controlled by third countries entities, but that requires specific guarantees from a given government that hosts that company. Ultimately, it's open to defense actors, defense companies, but also, and we see that more and more, in specific projects, we have new entrants to the sector, and we are very happy with that because it also helps reaching the second objective we have with this instrument, so increasing inclusiveness. I mean, we have specific benefits for consortia that are bringing in small and medium-sized companies. We have so-called bonus of co-financing rates, so a project can benefit from a bit increased co-financing rate, so more costs are being covered by the grant. And also we have specific calls that are targeting small and medium-sized enterprises and specifically research organizations in the European Union.
Thank you. And one last question. Jean-Marie, I have absolutely not forgotten about you.
Don't worry.
Just one last question is, you know, what are the criteria? I mean, you said you received a lot of applications, so making a decision must be quite difficult. What are the criteria, and have those been affected or shaped by the events in the last couple of 2-3 years?
Well, it's public administrations. We have kind of straitjackets. There is not much improvisation there. I mean, the criteria are very well spelled out in the regulation. So the European regulation that gave life to the European Defence Fund, regulation from 2021. There are specific award criteria that we need to follow when evaluating each of the proposals. That includes, I don't know, innovativeness, it includes added value, it includes the level of the cooperation that a specific proposal generates. It's about the long-lasting effect of that cooperation and so on. There's a little bit difference between the research actions that we are awarding and development actions. For the development actions, there are more award criteria, but nevertheless, it's all set in stones. And it's pretty much algorithmic. We're just checking how individual proposals are scoring against those criteria, and the sum of those points tell us which of the project is worthy, which project is less worthy of being awarded specific grants.
Thank you. I will let you breathe for a few minutes. Jean-Marie, as I was saying, I've definitely not forgotten about you. So you represent, you know, GICAN represents the French naval and maritime industry. So from your point of view, how have the events in these last few years, you know, helped shape the sector at the moment?
Yes, thank you, Alex. Yes, we represent the French maritime industry, more than 300 companies in France. But more and more involved in European cooperation. It's a fact that from several years we are more and more involved in these processes. not only as association, but also as association, but in persuading our companies to enhance cooperation at European level. And for example, we have a manager settled in Brussels now. It's very mandatory to explain what happens in Brussels for our companies of many sizes, not only the large groups. There's no problem for that, but smaller and innovative companies. And also we are involved in SEA Europe and SEA Naval in particular as association with all the main players of the sector. And the fact is that from 2015 to now, Europe is still the number 2 in the Navy ships delivery at the world level. We are still the number 2. Europe is European Union, UK, and Norway, just to give a precision. So, and the first one is Asia. It's a challenging time for our industry. From some classes of ships, North America is still number 2 sometimes, but globally, we are the number 2. What we do in the future facing this reality, but it's today. What will be the situation after the day, and the threats are evolving fast. You know, new domains of conflictuality like seabed warfare and so on and so forth, and the rise of new technologies is a challenging time for together. So we see new actors outside the European Union in the landscape, traditional actors, strong countries like China, for example, keeping more and more pieces of market day by day, but also emergent countries, more and more active in the naval domain because of that fact of superiority and influence at a global level. And we are still in an international competition between our own industry, because it's first national industries. You can't settle a shipyard from one country to another country. It's not realistic. You can't speak about a sort of Airbus, theoretical Airbus, common European. But we are still and now acting for developing European cooperation more and more, because we have new tools, as DG DEFIS explained, with the European Defence Fund, with PESCO, with another element between member states to go forward, to go more than the European treaties allowed to do that. So it's new tools, and also because we are facing this international competition also for non-EU actors, and but we are facing a reality. There is no real increase of domestic budgets. It's around 2% of GDP. It's not evolving a lot. So we are in a phase that we want to focus step by step to enhance a better cooperation between us, all industrial in the shipyard and all globally in the naval industry. But we are facing a sort of reality, and we are calling a new dynamism for that. And in fact, it's a matter of projects, more and more common projects. It's time to do that, and also because we are a dual industry. I want to repeat that, even if some players are only in the military side because of subcontracting companies acting in huge projects. It's a real dual industry, not only in the transportation technologies, but also civilian nuclear technologies, energies at sea. So it's a challenging time for sovereignty for our industry in Europe. And the only way to solve the solution is to cooperate more and more. Not to consolidate, to decide to consolidate one day. One day. It's just to enhance cooperation first, and we take the subject by the good way between us. R&D first on some key pieces. It's not easy, but we try to do the best to do that. Common developments, and after it's a matter of member states. What do they want? So we are ready for that, and we think long term, because our industry is a long-term industry. So it's a reason why we focus on R&D first, because it's a long-term decision. But step by step, day by day, we try to do our best. And you give some example of project of cooperation. We may We may do more, but it's the time to discuss about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. I see that Elie has his mic in his hand. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, absolutely. Building up and maybe playing this think tanker mood downer, as I used to say. On the budget point and on the technological race, I think it's very important aspect. The budgets have increased in the last 10 years. The number of NATO countries who actually passed the threshold of the 2% actually very sizable. We moved from 4 countries to 20-something countries who are now above the threshold of 2%. So the defense effort is actually sizable. Is that enough? No, and I agree with you. Why? Because technology and challenges and threats, of course, are evolving much faster than the funding. What happens when you have new technology challenges, new technological threats, and new technological opportunities that cost more money, and that maybe they cost double the size, and you only increase by 20% the size of your procurement budget? Then what do? You do trade-offs. And this is what we've been doing for a long time in the defense industry, and especially in the naval industry. Davide was mentioning the need for trade-offs between less crude systems to more AI-enabled systems and more. So, of course, and you can do that, and you need to do that. The other trade-offs that we've been doing is trade-offs between the performance of the system and the technological complexity and the number of platforms. The problem is that, especially in the naval domain, where you have actually a very limited number of platforms. How many frigates do we have in the French Navy? 15 format frigates. How many aircraft carrier are there in the French Navy, in the Italian Navy? 1. How do you do trade-offs when you're down to 1 platforms? So we get to the format question, where we have, so you always have brilliant engineers who find a way to sort of square the circles, but of course we have a budgetary situation, and if we don't accept at some point to increase at least the budget at the same pace of technological innovation and threat inflation, you're going to have a problem, and we're facing that. If you add that to another big problem that we haven't really touched upon yet, especially at the European level, is fragmentation of our industry. Is that, it really causes a big problem if on the top of that sort of dilemma, you're doing a lot of things differently. Of course, you have the EDF and you have the technological bricks that sort of incentivize us to at least do the R&D together, or to be more cohesive. But at the procurement level, at the actual programmation level, you still have a very, very fragmented landscape, especially in the naval domain, especially in Europe, with common threats, with limited and budgetary constraints. You have 3 shortfalls, and we'll just stop there, that you need to keep in mind and that we need to fight off. One is national specifications. We have too much divergent national specifications. Look at the Constellation program in the U.S. The U.S. Navy wanted so many different things that at the end, the boat is not going to be the same boat that was sold at the beginning, right? And you're having other stuff like that within Europe. Look at the Michnik program in Poland, between the difference that Babcock is now facing. So specifications is sort of cutting off all the scale economies that you can make with, having sort of general procurement. Then you have cycles, procurement cycles. You have a problem where people are not aligned in procurement cycles. I've seen that, for instance, in the FKSW MBDA program for the missiles. The Brits and the French working together because they want their missiles They want to renew their missiles, but some are more in a hurry than others. So the synchronization of a procurement cycle is a very big problem, and it begets fragmentation. It generates fragmentation. And the final big problem, maybe the biggest of all, is geographical returns. You know, any countries want to, you know, they say, okay, I buy this boat, I buy these systems, but I want some jobs for me. I want some technological transfer. I want some of the ships to be built in my country, in my shipyards, which is fair and sound. I understand that. But in the end, you cut, again, off all the scale economies that you could do in European cooperation. And so if you have the three shortfalls, the budgetary dilemma, and the fragmentations, then it gets you to a European naval industry landscape which is less than optimal and maybe not totally up to the stakes that we are confronted with.
Thank you very much, Elie, for bringing us down to earth again. I saw that there were quite a few situations here you wanted to answer to, so Jean-Marie, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Elie, for your for your vision. But I don't know it's a real term adapted is fragmentation now. Because we try to combine to enhance cooperation from one end, and the fact is that our national industry is a sort of necessity for respective countries too. It's not easy, it's not, as I say, to have a model of unique model of conciliation. But the fact is, we try, everybody try to enhance bilateral and trilateral cooperation. We have many examples between France and Italy, for example, between France, Dutch and Belgium, and also Dutch with Germany, and so on and so forth. We have many examples of this with projects that will enhance and will give a new power of our industry, facing the fact that non-EU industry is acting rapidly, quickly, to catch a sort of dominance in some technological sectors. And we are interoperable. We have NATO countries, mainly. So our standard, natural standard in NATO, it's good for also for many reasons. But the fact is, do we want collaborative, system, European or non-European system? It's an example. So because of budget, we have not enough money to develop with system providers or shipyards to rise operationally a new solution around collaborative combat. We try some solution, but we must more focused on new budget engagement and new collaboration around artificial intelligence, autonomous system, and new domains of conflictuality. So we try to explain that with the long-term vision, we will, member states, European Union, because of stimulation, and the new way to imagine EDIP and EDIS also, the new tools will reappear in the next future, and take into account that the naval industry, the specificity is a long-term approach. It's a short-term vision is not adapted for us.
Thank you. Elie, I will give you a chance to answer to all of these comments later on, but I saw a lot of nodding going on by Davide.
No, it's okay. No, first of all, I couldn't agree more with Elie about the criticalities and the challenges that the segment, the naval segment, face at the moment. If you think that probably we have a number of platforms that is 5-6 times the number of United States, and that we have 1.5 manufacturing production line versus one in the United States. This gives you already a representation of what are the challenges. But on the other side, I cannot also agree more with Jean-Marie, because it's very difficult to believe that the nations can make a step back and try to work on common requirement when you are geographically set in a different environments with different threats. We are in Europe, but if you think about Northern Europe or the countries that are bordering Russia or the countries in the Mediterranean, we have different challenges, even different climate changes requirements at the moment. So it is very difficult. At the same time, I think that we have a number of examples on how we could work together. I mentioned the calls of EDF as an example, but there are other ways to collaborate. Some have been mentioned by Jean-Marie. There are the frigates between Italy and France, the anti-submarine warfare and the mine countermeasures between Belgium and the Netherlands. Again, the production license of Fincantieri of the submarines designed by TKMS, which are going into a further development with the design authority directly carried out by the Italian side. So we have different ways of collaborate. There may be also merger and acquisition ways, but this is very difficult because nations want to keep sovereignty of some of the technologies. That's natural. That is very normal. Way of cooperate is very different. There are also some cases in which industries are quicker, faster than the nations. I give an example. There have been a program at the beginning of 2000 between France and Italy for frigate destroyers, depends how the country called them, which are the Horizon type. Common platform, a lot of payloads that were similar. Some time ago, there was this midlife update process, and both navies discovered that the vessels are completely different. There has been a process of changes which has been tremendous. So, no efficiency, a lot of costs. So we need to avoid this kind of mistakes. But I wouldn't say that the best way is to go towards a consolidation, because it's not going to happen very fast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll come back to you, Jean-Marie, in a second, but I saw Milosz scribbling quite a bit, so we'd like to give you a chance to answer.
Yeah, just referring to what was said about the national specifications and the fact that that technically every country would like to have same platform but different platform. Again, in the European Defence Fund, we are indirectly addressing it. I mean, it's not only the cooperation of the industrial players, not only cooperation with the research organization, but the program is also cooperation between the MODs, Ministries of Defense, by extension the national navies. So for defense technologies, for specific calls for proposal, when we have a specific topic in a given year, before we have that topic, so for example, topic being defined as having a patrol corvette developed together, member state, they need to agree on joint requirements, so on the common requirements that they want to see from that product. And not only that, they also need to kind of pre-commit that ultimately they would want to acquire. So those that are supporting a given project, that they would ultimately want to acquire the product. And that also helps with this procurement cycles that are not being coordinated. Because ultimately, okay, once you start developing, once you start bringing a product from a lower level of TRL to higher, it creates a specific path for when that product will reach the market, and when a prototype that is developed, for example, under the European Defence Fund, would be marketable, would require the navies to acquire it. So European Defence Fund kind of also helps on this interoperability of platforms, increasing the platforms being. I mean, it will never be that a platform will be one single. It always will be a little bit different characteristics, as Davide explained. At least because we have different geographies in Europe, and we have different climate conditions. but at least we're going in the right direction.
Yes, I think it's baby steps, if anything, definitely. Jean-Marie, you wanted to add something?
Yes, just to mention that also we are glad that the European Union want to update this European maritime strategy for security. That the fact is, it's time to do it. It's time to do it also. The military mobility plan that. Many things for railways and roads, and not a lot for the shipping industry, for example. So there are many tools we may develop, and also the notion of strategic fleet. In France we developed this old concept in a new way, but we want to federate ideas around the needs to develop strategic fleet in Europe, with a real capacity to maintain a civilian naval industry for transportation, for all the goods to be able to for importation or to export. And we are in a time, a sort of path to war economy, because I don't want to say we are in war economy in France, because it's but we are a sort of path to war economy in all our countries in Europe. And but our product lines are full, because we just have the necessity to have only the product lines to deliver what the contracts authorize to deliver from member states, and for exportation, for export situation. And the civilian market, we are in a niche market with cruise ships, with ferry ships in Europe. But if we want to guarantee to our countries to have a sovereign shipbuilding industry in Europe tomorrow, we have to develop, and we have to be able to develop new product lines. So these new contracts, new projects with decarbonization, for example, possibilities for the civilian market, both close to the military market, if we need to develop more frigates, more corvettes tomorrow in Europe to defend ourselves. So it's a challenging times also for that.
Thank you. Now, gentlemen, time does really fly, unfortunately, and there's so much more that we could talk about. But I would like to open the closing statements with you, Elie, if you wanted to add something. Everybody sort of reacted to what you were saying, so please go ahead.
That's part of the job, right? No, maybe just to conclude, and circling back to what I said at the beginning, I really think that we have very tough times ahead of us in terms of strategic landscape, in terms of threat, in terms of actual naval combat and sea domain contests in a more general sense. I've been spending some time in Ukraine lately, and just trying to learn the lessons from what they what they learned from their almost 3 years of war now, and in terms of product design, if we're among industrials, so we can speak this language. They have this good enough mentality. They cannot afford to have a bit more time and define these very specifications that would make the product, the system, a bit more optimum. If it works, it works, and they need that now. And so they have this. Again, we're talking trade-offs between time and between performance. I think that if we're not going to be in the same situation that Ukraine is anytime soon, but if we accept that we have tough times ahead of us, we need to start to think maybe in terms of changing a bit. I appreciate all the national specifications aspects, all the geographical differences between Europe, all the traditions, we'll like to have these and that. But in the end, if the job is done, and I'm pretty sure that an Italian frigate could, do the job pretty well, as much as a French frigate could do it, for 95% of its mission. It's not the boat. It's the way you navigate it, you maneuver it, the way you think the mission that matters. I mean, I often say that the result of our last 20 years of operations would have been exactly the same if we had swapped the systems between France and Germany. I think that, to be honest, the strategic results of the operations would have been the same. So I think that we need to accept that and maybe to review a bit of our priorities. And I get the point that fragmentation may be not as terrible as I portrayed, but I still think that we're not scaled up at the right level of the challenges that are ahead of us. I'll leave it there.
No, thank you very much, Elie, for this. Milosz, did you want to have some concluding arguments?
Yes, I prepared some, but I would rather want to kind of respond to what Elie just said. And Elie is probably much more an optimist than I am. I am probably naturally born pessimist. So on this statement that probably we will not be near the situation where Ukraine is at the moment, I myself believe that okay, Ukraine is buying us time to prepare. What do we make out of this time? I mean, we need to, of course, hope for the best, but we need to prepare for the worst. And I think it's the kind of many of the analysts are now telling we have 5, 6, 7 years time max to prepare for potential full-blown conflict on the European Union soil. And okay, how to prepare? I think probably we need to look for efficiencies where we can have those, and in this context, cooperation of the naval industries, increased cooperation is a very good recipe, but I think we need to kind of change some of the patterns, how we work, how the industry works, how the navies are working. We need to do it fast.
Thank you very much. Davide, did you want to add something?
Only a few things. Very much appreciate what Elie was saying about Ukraine, because this is something that we experienced also at defense companies association level. We have noticed how the Ukraine has responded to some of the challenges, and this should be probably a lesson that we have to learn as industries and as nations. The way the Ukraine made possible to get rid of part of the Russian naval fleet is a real example, should be a real example for all of us. To do this, we need to be prepared. Preparedness was one of the leitmotif of the report of former President of Finland, Niinisto, who has presented the report a few days ago, and I think that we should really consider the fact that a considerable part of the budget should go to preparedness. Last but not least, there are some other possibilities for the industry to grow, and so very good, and thank you to the Commission for the EDF budget. But again, there are some other tools that we have explored. There are there are loans. There is a reshape of the European Investment Bank that needs to be done very fast. And those are all tools that we have to take into consideration if we want to fill this gap within 6, 7 years. That's a challenge.
Yes, not a lot to add, because Davide just says many things. We are at a time of mobilization. We have many tools, and as Davide explained, the fact that the European Commission give to our industries the opportunity to invest and to research and to be able to develop new tools is a new way to explain to the member states they have also to mobilize themselves facing the reality of threats around Europe. And Ukraine theater is very interesting for us because it confirms our vision. We don't want to have navies that specify for 40 years products 40 years before. It's impossible now with the turning technologies and the evolution of platforms. So we have to develop a short-term solution for the navies and to be able, as industry, to research and develop all the new adaptative system on the platform in the future. So the incremental process is now mandatory from our national armament directorates, but also in our common way to cooperate between industrialists now. And I think also that the proof of concept or to finance this sort of new intermediary tools, and with the help of EIB, for example, with the status of EDA, the European Defence Agency, with also for some countries may help some countries who have not a tradition of planification or programming or research agenda methods to enhance this way to be at the right moment with the right solution in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So to sum this all up in a few words, basically, we have a lot of challenges, but we also have the tools. Ukraine at the moment is buying us some time. So the question is, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to accept that we need to do compromises? That good enough is good enough? So perhaps we can have the same roundtable in a couple of years' time and see how this goes. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. It's been a fascinating panel. Thank you for the audience for being here as well. We appreciate your presence and your time. And have a wonderful rest of the show.
Thank you, Alex.